It's a windy day here on Mike's Motorworks, but there's still work to do. And on this episode, we're going to look at an option available to those who need to pull a little bit of the heavier loads. It all happens now here on Mike's Motorworks. Now, for those that don't know, it is really important that as you're deciding on what to tow and how to tow it, you need to figure out what your vehicles are capable of. Now, my personal vehicle is right here, all right? And I know this guy is fully capable of towing up to 7,000 pounds, all right? And that's from the manufacturer. Now, other vehicles, you'll have to check on yours specifically, all right? And I've towed quite a few heavy loads on this thing, but I did notice that when I towed heavy loads, it did have a little bit of that squirrel on me, and there was a reason for that, okay? Now, the other thing you have to be aware of is how much are you towing? And most of the vehicles, in this case, an RV, right, is going to have that information on one of the placards, okay? So let me show you that information here on the side of our placard on our RV. First thing, you have this required stamp here for cargo and carrying capacities. Of course, they're in kilograms here, and you can just round times 2.8 to get your, or 2.1 to get your, somewhere around there. It's like almost 2 to get your pounds. I'll have that information here on the screen below, right? And that tells you the basic capacities. And that's great, but that doesn't really help you with figuring out how much this thing is going to weigh when it's all loaded out. Of course, you got your standard tire information, which is really important. You don't want to overinflate or underinflate your tires on your RV or your trailer. Now here we have some information. I need to blur out my VIN on that, so I'll make sure I take care of that. But here we see that the gross weight of the vehicle, right, will be approximately 4,400 pounds. Well within my towing capacity for this vehicle. Unfortunately, when I had some loads on here, they were a little bit in that range, and I was really squirrely on the road because there was some additional squat. Now, that could have been because of the way that the load was on there. I was carrying a vehicle, all that engine weight on the vehicle was towards the tongue, and that pushed everything down. And as you can imagine, or as you know, if the tongue on the vehicle, okay, is doing one of these, right, and your vehicle is doing one of these, you are messing up the dynamics of the vehicle. Thusly, you're going to have problems with some squirreliness in there, right? So you need to make sure that you can evenly distribute the weight a little bit better. So what we're going to do today is we are going to install something that I picked up just for this and other loads. This is our solution. And yes, we are outside, thus you can see my rig in the lower right-hand side of the screen, but this is our weight distribution system, okay? Now, this weight distribution system, the particular model is 17057. All right, and this uses a round bar to help distribute the weight. Now you can see here that the weight rating for this is between 10,000 to 1,400 pounds, and the tongue weight rating is between 1,000 to 1,400 pounds, well within an underweight for what we need to tow this guy with, right? So this one will be available to use on other heavier loads like towing vehicles and other things in the future. And how it basically works is pretty simple, all right? Up at the front, okay, this is where it ties into the tongue jack itself, or my tongue, right, on the receiver, okay, on the tongue, and then has a little bit of a way to change the overall hitch height, and then these act as kind of like springs or arms. Think of them like arms on a wheelbarrow. You lift the arms of the wheelbarrow up, and you're distributing that weight more across the wheel of the wheelbarrow itself. Really neat, and we'll show you that here in more details. So right now, I'm going to open the box, and we're going to go from there, and well, it's already been opened, but you know, you get the idea. When you're towing RV trailers, okay, camping trailers, okay, you essentially need a 2 5/16 hitch, all right, hitch ball, all right. Now the shank on this guy is 1 1/4. In other words, I matched the hole from where the actual shank diameter is here to the diameter of the receiver hole here, and that's 1 1/4. And of course the shank itself is 2 3/4, more than sufficient to get it around that guy right there, right? So inside our box, we have our hitch head. We have our adjustable shank, also called a shank, so there you go. We have some various hardware, and then of course we have our front retainer clips that we're going to be spring loaded onto, all right, our brackets there, if you will, not clips. And of course down here you can see your spring bars. And of course I said earlier that we got this hitch separately. So the first thing we need to do is I want to go ahead and get the receiver hitch ball onto the head itself, and from there we need to get the head mounted onto the shank, and I need to figure out some basic measurements, and we'll get this party started. Now at this point we need to make sure that the vehicle itself, or the vehicle that's being towed, is level, because we're going to make a couple of different measurements. So as you can see, we got our level here, we got our bubble in the right exact spot, and we are set as far as that's concerned. Next thing we need to do is measure the actual height of the hitch ball for the leveling of the actual trailer itself. And I know it's hard to see here for the camera, but we're approximately right at, I say right at, we're going to do an approximate here because we're supposed to be on concrete. We don't have a big enough concrete pad to do this on. So with that in mind, we are in the grass here, so we're going to have to make some basic estimations here, but 20 1/2. Now I need to make the receiver hitch on top of the ball of the receiver match that 20 1/2 inches. All right, so now let's move to the top of the actual hitch itself and see where I'm at there. Now the ground to the very top of my receiver is at 19 3/4 there, so right in this area. So that's a difference of about 3/4 of an inch. Curt recommends measuring from the rear bumper, or the bottom of the rear bumper, down to the ground, and doing the same with the front. So we'll take note of these measurements and making sure that we use a uniform point. We're going to call that 21, okay? And let's go measure the front. And approximately 16 inches there. So approximately 16 or 16 1/2. We'll call it 16 1/2 there. Now with my base measurements in place, I'm going to go ahead and do an approximation on where I need to be as far as which hole I need to be at. So I know that when I put this on here, this is going to squat a little bit. But here's the thing. My unit, or my truck when I bought it, had an additional helper spring because the previous owner also went trailer park, or not trailer park, but RV camping. So he had a trailer as well, and there's a helper spring on the top. Now for those that don't know, on a leaf spring system, the uppermost spring, okay, below the other one, above the other ones, handles a majority of the load. And this is giving additional aid to that. So there's an additional spring that kind of is attached on the top, okay? And this was something that was done aftermarket to help balance the load. So I may not have as much squat as, say, a factory one. So again, when you get yours and you do this to your vehicle, you want to get your own measurements because you're going to have a different setup and a different position and location than I will. So our initial trial, we're going to go ahead and take this guy here, right? And I'm going to go ahead and set this right about here. And this should give me enough room that when I put the load of the camper on to the trailer hitch, all right, we should be good to go. Now there's also going to be some spacers and all that kind of good stuff that I need to put inside here. So I'm going to do that here in a few minutes, use the vise, and I'll show you how that works here in just a moment. Now it's time to get the shank onto the hitch head itself. Now, when they send this to you, each vehicle is different, and that's really important to understand because some vehicles are higher than others, some vehicles are lower than others, and you need to make sure that this is going to work with your particular rig. In other words, your particular ride and your particular RV or whatever you're towing, okay? So there's going to be different heights involved here, and this is to find some basic uniformity here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and get the receiver shank into the receiver head itself. But when they send it to you, they send you this little piece here in the hardware bracket, right? This little spacer here and about 7 different washers, okay? Now, what you want to do is essentially you put all of your washers on here, okay? Let me get all my washers together. Oops, I wasn't washing. There we go. All washers. I think that's all of them. Yep. All right. And then put it into the top space there. All right. And what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and set this where you had your measurements at. Okay. I'm going to turn this around for camera purposes. By the way, that thing's kind of chunky and heavy. All right. You're going to run one bolt in. Okay. Remember, this is for me, so this is my setup. Get that bolt in there. Get in your hole. There it goes. And then get your other bolt in through here. Now, right away, and I'm a little off here, I'll fix it in just a second. I know this is way too much, okay? Because you could see here that the angle isn't going to work for my ride, all right? There is way too much angle here, and if I were to set this on the truck as it sits right now, all right, this receiver ball would be facing backwards. In other words, there is a difference here. If this is level, this would be sitting way too angled back towards me. That is not going to work. We could do better. So I've already measured this, and I know that I require 3 washers, not all 7. So down to 3 washers, put that in there, put the shank back into the head itself, put those bolts through, put this bolt through, and we're gonna go put this on the truck to make sure it levels out. Now, I can tell you this is going to be really, really close because I have a square here, right? When I put the square here, okay, and measure and line it up, right, there is actually a slight slope here, okay? And that slope works in my favor, okay? So we're going to go show you that here now on the truck itself. Put the lime in the coconut and get it approximately where it'll be sitting with the hole there and the little clip. Alrighty, and you can see here that, yeah, we are definitely in the right slope, the right position. All right, is it slightly tilted forward, you think? Yep, absolutely. I got Dad's okay on that. And we're just going to give this a little quick little tightening back here to make sure it snoogs up, to make sure that everything is close and set into place, and then we'll go ahead and continue to ratchet everything around. So let's take our impact gun here. I'm going forward. How tight do I need it?
Just snug it. Just where it comes into play.
All right, snug down. Sure enough, everything looks good. We are now ready to put the rest of our hardware on, and I'll show you that on the workbench. So right now, we are currently loaded on this new hitch here. Now, we have not put the springs in just yet because I wanted to show what the difference the weight distribution system makes. All right, so we're going to go check out the level here. All right, so over here, we can see, and I'm going to try to get it close enough here, we are slightly off at the level. The bubble has returned more to that direction, to the back of the camper trailer itself. And when I measured over here on the back bumper, before we had a measurement of 22 inches, and you will see that I have now squatted, even with my helper spring, down to about 19 inches. So yeah, the weight distribution system is going to help out with this, right? But interesting enough, because of that extra helper spring, I could have squatted, I believe, a whole lot more with the RV. So it's definitely going to help. So what we're going to do here in a few moments is we're going to go ahead and raise the actual system up, okay? And that's going to allow us to put the helper springs into place and lock them into place. Now, the cool thing is that Pop went ahead and got this exact same system. So these clamps here are already installed where they need to be. So I didn't get that on camera, all right? And they're just simply attached and clamped in with a retaining bolt in the back there. We did have to use a shorter retainer bolt because of the battery. The camper runs on a 12-volt system. It runs off when it's unplugged, but it will run plugged as well. But it uses a 12-volt system for a majority of the appliances, including the refrigerator, which is really nice. But because that was in the way, we didn't want to build a new battery box. We just found it easier to go with the shorter bolts. So we're going to get that into place, and we'll show you what that looks like. So this right here is the magic end of the weight distribution system. These are essentially made out of a spring material. And what they do is they kind of work like a wheelbarrow, if you will. And what it'll do is, if you have a wheelbarrow, okay, if you're lifting up on this side, you're transferring the load, okay, across you and the wheels of the wheelbarrow itself. So as you pull up on it, the weight is transferred to the back. This does the same thing, okay? And so what will happen is it'll attach half of the weight load between this point here and this point here in the back where my knee is, where those clamps are, okay? Now, you're supposed to, on a long trip, grease these up with every single time that you use them, because these will be moving, these will be going back and forth along with the truck and the trailer itself, okay? So we're not going to do that today because I'm not moving the camper, okay? I'm just getting these set in place. We're doing some other things and what have you. But I wanted to get this initially installed so that when I'm ready to use the camper on my own, I can go ahead and use it. So I'm getting everything set into place. So we're going to show you how that looks. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to put this into time-lapse mode, but we're going to lift up the trailer end itself, okay? And also, we're going to keep it attached to the truck. And as it's lifting, okay, it's going to lift the truck and the camper up, okay? I'm going to put these on. I'm going to set the chain lengths, okay? And I'm going to show you where those get set at. And then we're going to put it back down again. And then we're going to take our final measurements to show you how it makes a big difference as far as pulling the vehicles. Check it out. So we're roughly in place, and as you saw on that video lapse mode, that time lapse, everything was lifting up, all right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to lock the chains into place here. And again, you don't want to have too few chains here, because as this thing is turning, this will bind here. So ideally, and we're giving a rough estimate here, I'm thinking that we're going to need, and this is based off the setup that we did with Dad's truck, about 2 lengths off, for leaving a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lengths. So we'll give this a shot, see how it goes. Now this is going to be pretty easy to do. I would say that's a little too loose. So I'm going to go up 1 more length. That is way too loose. If I did that with my fingers and my hands, that was way too loose. So we're going to set that there. Making sure there's no binding. Oopsie. Up 2 again. That's not bad. Look at my air go. Ah, there we go.
Still going to be 2 things.
Huh?
Still going to be 2. You try it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's
too easy. Yeah, you're going to need
won't they get that? Yeah, won't they keep that too close here?
All
right. All right. So that was, again, Pop says too loose. It did feel a little loose on there. I would agree with that. So we're going to go down even more. But let's see if I can even get that chain in there. I may not be able to get that chain in there. Oh yeah, there it goes. Probably want to be wearing gloves on this just in case you catch yourself on something. Be really careful because this will flip out of your hands. It is a spring, and boom, there we go. Bob's your uncle. And we're going to do the other side, and then we're going to lower it to make sure there's actually any binding here. So we do not want binding in this position. See the other side. All right, so let's see how things turned out. As you can see here, the ball is slightly forward. That means we have an angle such as this, right? You can see here that, oopsie, that the spring bars are nearly parallel, and there shouldn't be any binding. In my particular case, I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total links, which is perfectly acceptable. You don't want to have anything really less than 5, because then there's a risk of your spring bars attaching your frame. Then, if we take our final measurement back here, grab tape measure real fast. You can see that we are roughly at 21. We were at 22. And so that's within the 1 inches where we need to be, a whole lot more than the squattier 3 inches we were at earlier. And again, this system, you can see now how it works to transfer the weight. Instead of all being the weight up here, okay, you have transferred now the weight to the tongues, and the tongues are kind of acting like that. Pull the wheelbarrow up and puts that weight more towards the trailer itself, giving you a whole lot more stability on the road. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode.